I had 3 rules for staying safe on late deliveries in New York. Do not cut through subway corridors after dark. Double check the apartment number before knocking. Never get involved with the customers. That night, rain slicked the streets to black glass, and I was about to break all 3. The address on my phone glowed through a thin mist of water. 4782 Park Avenue, apartment 23C. I said the numbers under my breath like a spell. Trying to anchor myself to the routine, I balanced the pizza box against my hip and pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that smelled like polished wood and money. The doorman gave me a distracted nod. The kind people give to delivery kids when they stop seeing faces and only see uniforms. I did not mind. Invisibility is a kind of safety. You cannot be judged if you are not really there. The elevator shuddered as it climbed, an old iron stomach swallowing floors one by one. I watched the panel blink up to 23 and listened to the tired hum of cables over a soft echo of classical music somewhere in the walls. My sneakers left wet crescents on the marble. The doors opened with a reluctant chime and I stepped into a hallway washed in warm light. Thick carpet softened my footsteps. The air smelled like lemon oil and old books. I passed 23A, then 23B. When I reached 23C, I stopped. The door stood slightly open, a slim triangle of gold spilling into the hall. My finger hovered over the bell. Maybe they were expecting me. Maybe they had been tracking my little icon on the app and knew I was here. I knocked anyway. No answer. I knocked again. Louder. Still nothing. Against every alarm bell in my head, I nudged the door with my knuckles and it swung wider. My first thought was that I had stepped into a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city glittering like a jewelry case. Modern art hovered on the walls. The furniture was sleek and quiet, the kind that looks simple until you touch it and realize it costs more than your yearly rent. I took one careful step inside. That is when he appeared. He was a blur of motion and water at first. A man fresh from the shower, crossing the room with a towel riding low on his hips, dark hair damp. A body carved by discipline. None of that was what held me. It was his eyes, steel gray and alert, assessing me with calm intensity that cooled the air. I froze. The pizza box slipped. Time tilted. The lid flapped open and a constellation of pepperoni arced through space before surrendering to a beautiful rug with a dark, spreading stain. My mouth formed a sound that carried no language. I dropped to my knees and tried to scoop slices back into the box with frantic hands. Heat rushed up my neck. I heard myself say sorry over and over like a broken metronome. Stop, he said, and his voice was low and even, the kind of voice that expects to be obeyed. A warm hand closed around my wrist. You are making it worse. I looked up at him, that close. The details sharpened. A jawline that could anchor a ship, a smile that was not quite a smile. More a suggestion that he had learned restraint the hard way. The gray in his eyes held something I could not name. Amusement, annoyance, curiosity, all of it at once. I will pay for the rug, I said, which was ridiculous. I could maybe pay for a corner of the rug in 5 years if I never ate again. I will work extra shifts. I will. You are in the wrong apartment. He said. The words landed like a gentle slap. I blinked. The pizza box dripped in my hands. He stood and offered me his palm. When I did not take it at once, He lifted an eyebrow as if I had missed a cue in a play and repeated the line without sound. I set the cardboard on the coffee table and let him pull me up. His grip was firm, calloused in places that did not fit the rest of him. An unexpected map of real work under the polish. I am Adrian Cole. He said, you want 23C. This is 23D. A quiet, hopeless laugh escaped me. So I broke into a stranger's home and destroyed a priceless rug for no reason. That about covers it. I glanced around for a place to hide. There was none. Only glass and art and the city watching me. I should have fled. Drop a note. Salvage what slices I could. Apologize on the app. Instead, I stood there, still and humming inside, aware of him the way you are aware of a storm rolling in over a flat sea. I should go, I said, probably. He said, neither of us moved. Somewhere above us, a piano trembled through a ceiling. Not a full song, just a few threaded notes that broke and faded the way light does when clouds move past the sun. I realized I was holding my breath. What is your name? He asked, Lily. I said, Lily Carter. He nodded once, as if filing the answer where it belonged. Would you like a drink? Lily Carter. This was an absurd question for two reasons. One, I had just vandalized his living room with a pepperoni disaster. Two, nothing about him suggested casual time with strangers. Yet his tone held no pressure. He asked like a man who rarely asks favors and means them when he does. Just one, I said, I still have a delivery, or what is left of it. His mouth tilted. The almost smile turned into a real one for exactly one breath. Then he vanished down a hall and I stood alone, surrounded by evidence of a life I could not imagine for myself. I wiped my palms on my red jacket. It looked childish in here. A bright smudge in a painting of neutrals in steel. I drifted along the wall. The art was not prints. I knew that the way, you are near a warm fire, even before you feel the heat, texture and depth stood up from the canvas in low relief. Brushstrokes pulsed with old intention. My stomach did a small somersault. He came back in a black shirt and with a bottle that carried an elegant label. He poured with easy muscle memory. Set a glass in my hand and took the armchair across from me as if the furniture arrangement had been designed for this moment. Tell me why you walked in. He said, because the door was open. I answered, because the hallway was quiet and I could not leave a pizza on the floor and sprint for the elevator without knowing, because everything about this place told me to keep my distance, and I am sometimes a moth. He nodded like he understood more than I had said. Are you a student? Yes. Art history. I deliver food to stay afloat. That is the glamorous part of my story. He looked toward the painting I had been studying. That is why you stared at my Rothko like it was a confession. My throat went dry. That is an actual Rothko. It is, he said, you have a Rothko in your living room, a small one, he said, as if that softened anything. My laugh was too loud in the quiet room. I took a sip to hide it, and the wine was soft and layered and dangerous. Comfort unfurled in my chest. Who are you? I asked. Adrian Cole. He said again, but this time the words bent. He leaned back, and a faint wall rose behind his eyes. I work too much. That is the headline. Not an answer. It is the only one tonight. I knew a boundary when I saw one. I let it stand. Then ask me something else. I said, something that makes us even... He studied me over the rim of his glass. Why did you almost run, and why did you not... I almost ran because I am a careful person pretending to be a brave one. I did not, because those few notes through the ceiling told me you are also pretending. He set the glass down with careful precision. I used to play, he said, piano. Yes. Why did you stop? He looked at the rug as if the stain had opened a window onto some other year. My father died. I took the company. Work filled the room and the music had nowhere to sit. The answer landed in me like a coin in a deep fountain. I knew the sound it made without hearing it. I do not know why I said what I said next. Only that the words felt like the only honest ones available to me. Play again. I said, not tonight. He said, and the refusal was gentle, not defensive. Then tell me why you told me to stay. Because you looked at me like I was just a person. Because the last dozen conversations I have had were with people who had scripts they wanted me to read. Because you dropped a pizza on my rug and then apologized, like the rug had feelings and it made me laugh inside my chest for the first time in months. I felt something slide in my ribs. A click. A door I had not realized was unlatched opened wider. I was aware all at once of my wet shoes, the smell of cedar soap near his collar, the ticking hush of rain on the windows, the ridiculousness of my life up until exactly this minute. We talked not about the company, not about money, about books that had kept us alive at 19, about city noises we found soothing and those that made sleep impossible, about my thesis on women of the Renaissance who painted themselves as the subject instead of the ornament, and the way that stubborn act still felt radical. He asked questions like he meant them. I noticed his hands, the shape of a habit in them, the invisible reach toward keys when a sentence ended on a certain note. At some point, he took the ruined box to the kitchen and returned with a towel and a shrug that said there were worse disasters than sauce on wool. At some point, I realized the delivery next door would be late enough to require a miracle. I checked my phone and my stomach dropped through the floor. I never delivered the pizza. I said, he stood, I will handle it. You cannot fix my job. I said, half laughing, half choking on panic, watch me. He said, and the almost smile returned. He crossed to the door and paused there, one hand on the frame. A profile cut against the city light. Do not disappear. Lily Carter. I nearly told him that disappearing is my default. That invisibility has been my camouflage since I arrived in the city with 2 suitcases and a scholarship. Instead, I nodded. He left and the apartment exhaled. I wandered to the shelves and traced titles with my eyes. A first edition of Gatsby with a spine softened by use. A photograph slipped from between pages and fluttered to the floor. A younger Adrian with a man who shared his eyes. The caption on the back was brief and aching. I slid it back where I had found it, as if returning a prayer to its altar. He came back carrying 2 boxes from somewhere fancy and a paper bag that smelled like truffle and butter. It is handled, he said. Your neighbor is fed and very forgiving. He thought I was your boyfriend, and I did not correct him. Heat rose in my face. The word boyfriend rattled around the room like a bird that had flown in through an open window and could not find its way out again. He set the food on a table meant for a dozen people and then looked at me as if asking a quieter question. Stay a little longer. He said, my rules lined up before me like dutiful soldiers. Do not take the long way after dark. Double check the numbers. Do not get involved. I heard the rain begin again in sharp threads and felt something at last that was stronger than fear. It did not sound like recklessness. It sounded like a door opening into my own life. One drink, I said, then I deliver what is left of my night. He nodded, and that small, unguarded smile made a brief return. Warmer now. I sat, the city glittering on the other side of the glass. And for the first time since arriving in New York, I let the moment be what it was. A mistake that felt like a beginning. When I agreed to stay for just one drink, I didn't realize that those 4 words would become the first domino in a chain of choices that would change everything. Adrian poured the wine with quiet precision, the liquid catching the light as it swirled into crystal. I held my glass awkwardly, aware that my chipped nails didn't match the flawless world around me. The couch sighed when I sat down, and the city outside shimmered through the glass like a living thing. He took the armchair opposite me, leaning back with the ease of someone used to control for a long moment. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that hums between 2 people who both feel something brewing but don't know what to name it. So, he said finally, his tone soft but deliberate. Art history, that's a field for dreamers. I like to think of it as storytelling through time. I replied, every brushstroke is someone trying to be remembered, trying to say, I existed. He studied me, head tilted. And what are you trying to say? I looked down at the deep red of my wine, that I belong here, not here. Exactly. I gestured around at the penthouse, but in this city, in a life that feels like my own, that I'm not just some delivery girl trying to survive until something better happens. The confession hung between us. Adrian's expression softened. You remind me of someone I used to know. Who myself? He said, almost to himself. He stood then, walking to the large piano tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a sculptural divider. Its lacquered surface reflected the city lights. Black glass over black glass. He brushed a hand across the keys, but didn't sit. You play, I said, remembering the faint melody that had drifted through the ceiling earlier. I used to... He murmured, not anymore. Why not? He looked over his shoulder at me, eyes unreadable. Because it hurts. Something inside me twisted at that. I set down my glass and crossed the room before I could stop myself. The air felt heavier near him, thick with silence and memory. Music isn't supposed to hurt, I said quietly. Everything beautiful does. Eventually, for a moment, I thought he wouldn't play. Then, slowly, he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys. The first notes came hesitant, clumsy even, but then the melody found its breath, flowing like water over stone, fragile, aching, alive. It wasn't just music, it was confession. I watched his face as he played, and the careful armor he wore began to crack. Each note stripped away something unseen. The perfection, the control, the distance. What remained was raw and human and devastatingly real. When the last note faded, the silence that followed felt sacred. I haven't played since my father died, he said softly. He was the one who taught me, said the piano doesn't lie. You can fake everything else, your smile, your confidence, your whole life, but the keys will always tell the truth. I didn't know what to say. So I did the only thing that felt right. I reached out and touched his shoulder. Then maybe it's time to start telling the truth again. He turned, and for the first time since I'd met him, Adrian Cole looked uncertain, vulnerable. You're not afraid of saying things that matter, are you? I'm afraid of plenty. I said, I just try not to let fear pick my sentences. He laughed, a low, surprised sound that warmed the room. You really are something else. Lily Carter. He stood and moved closer until there was just a breath between us. Do you always walk into strangers' apartments and tell them how to live their lives only when they look like they need to be reminded they have one? I said, for a heartbeat. We simply stood there, caught in the current. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. You're dangerous. You don't even know me. I'm starting to, he said, and there was something in his voice that made my heart stutter. He gestured toward the table. Sit. Eat. You look like you haven't had a real meal in days. I didn't argue. The smell from the takeout bag was intoxicating truffle pasta. Fresh bread. A pizza he'd apparently ordered just for me. He opened the box with a smirk. Pineapple. You seem like someone who would choose chaos. I laughed. Don't judge me. It's the perfect topping. It's an abomination. He said solemnly, taking a bite anyway, but I'll allow it. We ate like old friends, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his mother, who lived in London and collected antique jewelry but never wore any. I told him about my cat back in Queens named Vincent, short for Van Gogh, who hated everyone except me. As we talked, I felt my guard slipping. I forgot to worry about how I looked, how I sounded, or how ridiculous it was to be sitting in a millionaire's apartment sharing pizza and wine, somewhere between the laughter and the music still echoing in the walls. Something shifted. Why did you really tell me to stay? I asked finally. When the conversation quieted, he met my eyes. Because you're not impressed by me. Everyone else wants something. Money. Favors. Connections. You just looked at me. I looked at you because you were standing half naked in front of me. He grinned. The kind of grin that could undo a person if they weren't careful. That too, I rolled my eyes. But the tension broke into laughter. He leaned back, wine glass in hand. You know, I've been to 43 business dinners and 27 charity galas this year. And I can't remember a single real conversation from any of them. Then you show up, destroy my rug, and somehow make me feel alive. I stared into my glass. That's the saddest compliment I've ever heard. Maybe, but it's honest. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. It wasn't a calculated move. It felt like gravity. Tell me something real. Lily. He said, something no one else knows. I hesitated, then said, I'm terrified. I'll spend my life studying people who followed their passion instead of ever following mine. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it. He just nodded, thumb tracing lazy circles against my knuckles. Then promise me you won't. I can't promise that. Try. The air between us thickened, soft and fragile. His hand lingered on mine. And suddenly, the world outside ceased to exist. The rain, the city, the ticking clock. Adrian, I started, but he was already standing. Come here, he said. He walked back to the piano and sat down again, gesturing for me to join him. You inspired this disaster, so you might as well suffer through it with me. I sat beside him, our thighs brushing, The contact sent a shock through me, subtle but impossible to ignore. He began to play a different piece this time, something slow and searching. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash through me. Each note carried emotion words could never hold. The music wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that honesty felt like confession. When the melody faded, he turned to me, his face inches from mine. "I don't know what this is," he said softly, "but I don't want it to stop." "Me neither," I whispered. Then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, the kind of kiss that feels like a question. But the answer came quickly, yes. 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 And the kiss deepened. Slow and certain. I felt every unspoken thought, every lonely night, every quiet hope in it. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. That was, he started, a terrible idea. I finished. He smiled, his forehead resting against mine. "Probably, but it doesn't feel like one." I laughed. Shaky and quiet. "I should go." "You should." He agreed, not moving an inch. We stayed like that for a long moment, neither of us brave enough to move. Both of us knowing that something irreversible had just begun. When I finally stood, my knees felt weak. "Thank you for the wine." "And for the music," he nodded, still seated at the piano. "Thank you for breaking the rules." As I stepped out into the hallway, the door clicking softly behind me, I realized he was right. I had broken all 3 of my rules that night, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't regret it. Morning arrived like a soft confession. Light eased past the curtains and spread across the ceiling in pale bands. And for a long moment, I did not know where I was. The sheets were too clean, the mattress too generous, the quiet too full. Then I felt the heat of a body curved along my back, an arm draped over my waist like a promise. And the memories came in a gentle rush. The wrong door. The music, the wine, Adrian. The kiss that felt like a beginning and a warning all at once. I lay still, afraid to move and break whatever spell we had conjured the night before. The city hummed somewhere far below. Time stretched. I could have stayed like that forever, if not for the small voice inside me that still kept lists and asked practical questions. I had class. I had a life outside this room. I had rules once, and now I had the aftermath of breaking them. Adrian stirred behind me. His hand shifted at my waist, warm and unhurried, as if even his touch had learned restraint. I turned carefully to face him. Morning softened him. The strong lines of his face eased. A lock of dark hair fell over his forehead. He seemed younger and somehow more human. When his eyes opened, gray and clear, he looked at me the way people look at something they cannot quite believe is real. "Hi," he said. His voice was rough with sleep. "Hi," I answered, and it sounded like a shy word from a different version of me. "This is real." He said, "Last night happened. Apparently, I am about to panic." He said with absolute honesty and no drama. "Want to panic together?" I asked. He laughed, the sound warm and private, and pulled me in closer for a second, like panic could be held off with proximity. Then he rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling as if it had questions he needed to answer. "Let us have breakfast." He said, "Let us pretend this is normal for half an hour. You cook." I asked. I am an expert at toast and coffee and making reservations. He said, "Come on, I will attempt the first two." He handed me a soft shirt from his drawer, and I slipped it on. The hem brushing my thighs, we padded into the kitchen, both of us suddenly aware of the quiet domesticity of the hour. The refrigerator betrayed him at once. It held milk I would not trust, a lonely lemon, and a bottle of champagne with dust on the wire cage. He looked inside as if it might reveal a secret compartment. Then he turned to the counter with ceremonial seriousness and slid bread into a toaster. "Stand back," he said. "This requires precision." I laughed, the kind of laugh that loosens knots. "Move." I am magic with limited ingredients. Between the two of us, we managed coffee, toast with a thin rescue of jam, and eggs coaxed into something edible. We ate at the island, knees touching, everything simple and oddly intimate. I would have thought the morning after would be awkward, all the unsaid things crowding the table, but it was not. It felt like breathing. It felt like the kind of quiet that follows truth. "Tell me something you have never told anyone," he said, cupping his mug in both hands. I considered the question. "I am afraid I will spend my life studying the courage of other people and never find enough of my own." He nodded, not surprised, not dismissive. That is exactly how I have felt for a long time. He said, "Like I am wearing a suit cut from my father's life, walking around inside it, pretending it fits. What would fit?" I asked. He looked toward the piano as if the answer lived there. "I would play again," he said slowly. "I would fund music programs. I would build something that does not require me to be less human, to be effective. I would find a place that feels like mine and fill it with people who do not care about my last name." It sounded like a dream he had rehearsed in the dark for years, afraid to say it aloud. I felt the courage tug inside me. "What would you do?" he asked. "If responsible Lily took a nap, I would go to Italy and stand in front of the paintings I have only seen on paper. I would write in a way that makes people who do not care about art begin to care. I would teach when I am ready. Not because it is the next safe step, but because I have something to give. And I would not be afraid to love something that could break me." His fingers found mine on the counter. The contact was small and lit up the rest of me. "Then let us not be afraid," he said. I glanced at the clock on my phone and winced. "I have class at 9. It is 6. Stay for actual breakfast," he said. Then he saw my look and smiled. "Fine. Stay for almost actual breakfast. 30 minutes. Then I will watch you walk to the elevator, so I know I did not imagine you." We ate our almost breakfast, and the conversation slid easily from confession to detail, from big truths to small facts. He asked about my thesis, and he listened like the language mattered to him. I told him about women who painted themselves into history, and he asked the right questions. He told me how quiet the apartment had become in recent years, and I asked about the photograph I had slipped back into Gatsby. He did not say much, but he did not shut down. Either he spoke about his father, the way grief can bend time, the way duty can sound like love when you are trying to be good, when the coffee was gone and real life tapped the glass. He stood and set his mug down with deliberate care. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said. "A real date. Not an accident. Not a rescue mission for a neighbor. Your choice of place. No black cars or velvet ropes. I want to be where you are comfortable." I hesitated because hesitation is a habit. Then I nodded. One date. I pick. Nothing fancy. Deal. He said, and the relief in his face startled me with its sincerity. Before I left, he handed me a sweater that was too big on me and told me to keep it until the evening. It felt like a gentle claim. He walked me to the door, and we stood there with very little space between us, both pretending we were better at goodbyes than we were. Thank you, I said, and meant all of it. For the music, for the patience, for the truce with toast. Thank you for rearranging my idea of a good night. He said, see you at 7. He watched the elevator close and I rode down through 23 floors of floating feeling. By the time the doors opened, caution had caught up and began to murmur in my ear again. This is fast. This is complicated. This is a person with a life that looks nothing like yours. But when I stepped out into the bright lobby and the rain-freshened air, another voice spoke up. This is also honest. This is also you choosing something instead of waiting for it to pass you by. On the subway, I texted Emma one sentence that guaranteed chaos. I think I met someone. She responded with 7 messages and 11 questions and a demand for coffee at noon. By the time I slipped into my morning lecture, Emma had claimed the seat beside me and angled her whole body in my direction like a spotlight. You are glowing, she whispered. I am not. You are. Spill, she said, and then had to bite her lip when the professor cleared her throat. I lasted 20 minutes. After class, we sprinted through the drizzle to the coffee shop that smelled like ambition and burnt espresso. In our usual corner, I told her the edited version, wrong door, piano, wine, conversation that felt like walking into a room inside myself. The kiss, breakfast. The invitation for dinner, I skipped the rug and the towel and the parts that belonged only to my memory. Emma listened with the kind of focus she usually saved for last-minute exam plans. When I finished, she narrowed her eyes. You are doing the thing. She said, what thing? Building the ending before you have finished the first chapter. Stop it. Go to dinner. Be yourself. If it is real, it will move toward you. If it is not, you will still have this sunrise to keep. I hated how often she was right. I promised to text her the name of the restaurant and to call her if I needed a rescue code. She rolled her eyes and told me I needed a new coat more than a rescue, then hugged me hard enough to shake the air out of my lungs. The afternoon stretched in front of me like a tightrope. I tried to work in the library and managed 3 sentences in an hour. I pretended to outline a chapter and drew tiny pianos in the margins. At 5, my phone lit with his message. Still on for tonight. Where am I meeting you? My thumbs hovered over the screen for a second and then typed a name that meant comfort to me. Tony's Trattoria on Bleecker at 7. Cash only. He replied at once. Perfect. I cannot wait. Back home, I stood in front of the mirror with Emma on speaker as wardrobe jury. We chose dark jeans that fit like intention and a soft green sweater that made my eyes less tired. I wore my own boots because I know who I am in them. When I stepped onto the sidewalk, the evening had settled into that pleasant city glow where everything reflects everything else. I got to Tony's 10 minutes early and worried it was too ordinary. The windows fogged from the heat inside. The checkered cloths were faded by years of conversations. The doorbell chimed like a small bicycle bell when I pushed it. This was where celebrations were honest and heartbreaks were witnessed, and no one needed to perform. It was mine. Then I saw him walking toward me, and the worry dissolved. He wore jeans and a button-down. Nothing that announced money or distance. Just a man arriving with his whole attention. When he saw me, his smile lifted the space around us. He folded me into a hug like he had always known where my edges were. "You look beautiful," he said into my hair. "You look relieved." I showed up. I said, "Both true," he answered. Inside, Tony himself waved us to a corner table and set down a carafe without asking. The wine he gives to people, he decides to, the room smelled like garlic and tomatoes and long habit. Adrian looked around with unguarded pleasure. "This is perfect," he said. "This feels like a place where people talk for real." We talked like people who had been waiting to be asked the right questions. He told me how his work had become a language. He spoke fluently and joylessly. I told him how fear sometimes dressed up as responsibility, and I could not always tell the difference. We shared dishes and stole bites and laughed at nothing and everything. When the check came, I reached for it on instinct. Split. I said, "My place, my rules." He blinked, then nodded once, the respect there in the nod heavier than the money on the table. "Next time is mine." He said, "Somewhere I can use a card. Deal." I said, "Outside." The air had turned crisp and the city had tuned itself to evening. He took my hand and we walked without destination, a gentle orbit through streets that felt newly lit. In the park, we sat on a bench and watched a busker coax shy notes from a violin. The past felt far and the future did not press. The present was enough. "I do not want to rush this," he said after a while. "Last night was a spark and I am grateful for it. But I want you to know I am not here just for fire." "I know," I said. "Me either." "Then let us try the brave thing that looks small from the outside." He said, "Another date and another, see where our real lives fit instead of pretending we do not have them." I nodded. "No 5-year plan tonight. Just the next step." He walked me to a cab even though I insisted I could take the subway. He looked at me through the open door like he was already counting time. "See you soon." "Lily, see you," I said, and the car pulled away. On the ride home, I texted Emma 2 words. "It works." She sent back a line of hearts and then a single command. "Keep going." The next few weeks slipped by in a blur of coffee, laughter, and the kind of silence that feels safe. I used to think that people fell in love like falling off a cliff, sudden and terrifying. But with Adrian, it was quieter than that. Like waking up to realize the world had shifted overnight and somehow, without knowing when it happened, you were already standing somewhere new. We built a rhythm out of stolen time. Dinner after my late shifts, walks through the park when the city was still half asleep. He'd send voice messages of him playing piano soft, unpolished fragments that made my heart ache, and I'd send photos of art pieces I found between museum archives and street murals. It was strange and beautiful, the way 2 such different lives found a way to intertwine. He visited my apartment once, and I watched him duck under the low ceiling, his expensive watch glinting beneath the flicker of a weak light bulb. My roommates pretended to be casual but giggled uncontrollably after he left, whispering things like, "He looks like he stepped out of a movie." And for one dizzy second, I felt like I was the girl in the movie too. But real life doesn't care about romantic pacing. It started small, the first missed shift at work, the first assignment I handed in late because I'd spent the night at his place. I told myself it was worth it, that love was supposed to be messy. But then my credit card statement arrived. New clothes for dinners I couldn't afford, cabs instead of subways. meals at places where I didn't know how to pronounce the wine list. When I stared at the numbers on the screen, my stomach dropped. I was trying to live in a world that wasn't built for me. Emma noticed first. She found me in our usual coffee shop, my laptop open but untouched, my fingers tapping nonsense across the keyboard. "You look like someone canceled your Netflix subscription and your will to live," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I'm fine." "You're lying," icy head, pushing the screen toward her. "I'm broke." Like really broke? I've skipped 3 shifts. I'm behind on my thesis. And I'm pretty sure I just spent a month pretending I'm the kind of girl who can afford dry cleaning. Emma frowned. "He's never asked you to be anyone else." "I know." I rubbed at my temples. "He doesn't even notice. He opens wine bottles that cost my entire phone bill, and I'm there calculating how many pizzas I'd need to deliver to cover the tip. So tell him I can't. I don't want him to think I'm..." "What?" Portia interrupted. "Newsflash. You are poor. So am I. That's why we're grad students. He's not dating your bank account." "Lily." I stared at my coffee until the phone collapsed. I want to fit into his world without feeling like I'm borrowing someone else's shoes. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then stop trying to fit. Make him step into yours for a while. If he's worth it, he'll want to." I promised her I'd talk to him, but promises made over caffeine don't always survive real life. That evening, he texted, "Gallery opening at 8. Thought you'd love it. Come with me." My first instinct was yes. But then I thought about my unfinished thesis chapter, the stack of bills on my desk, and the uncomfortable truth that my world had started to revolve around his invitations. I typed and erased 6 replies before settling on "Can't tonight. Deadline for school." "Rain check." His answer came almost instantly. "Of course. Don't stress. I'll save you a glass of champagne for next time." It was kind, understanding, perfect, and yet it made something inside me ache. For the next few days, I buried myself in work. I barely slept. I ate noodles from a cup and wrote until my eyes blurred. The distance between us stretched into something heavy but necessary. He sent messages, simple ones, "Thinking of you. Don't forget to eat. Proud of you." I answered with short replies, afraid that if I said too much, I'd give in to missing him. By the 5th day, I finished the chapter. Relief hit like a wave. I pressed send on the email to my advisor and then sat back, empty. The silence of my apartment pressed in on me. I missed him. That night, while rain tapped against the window, my phone rang. His name lit the screen. "Lily." He said when I answered, his voice warm and a little rough, "You're alive. Barely. Buried under Renaissance Venice. I miss you." I closed my eyes. "I miss you too. Can I see you tonight? I'll come to you. You can work. I'll read. I just want to be near you." The temptation was physical, but I knew if I saw him now, I'd lose the fragile focus. I'd clawed back. "I need a few more days. I'm so behind. Adrian, I have to catch up." He was quiet for a beat. "Okay, but Lily, if it's more than school, if something's wrong, tell me. I'm fine." I lied. After the call, I sat in the dark and listened to the rain. I'd built this tiny distance for self-preservation, but it felt like punishment. 5 days later, My chapter came back with notes from Dr. Harlow and a rare compliment. This is your strongest work yet. Keep going like this, and you'll finish on time. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady, so naturally, life decided to test it. That evening, my delivery app pinged. I needed the money. I grabbed my jacket and headed into the storm. 3 orders later, soaked and exhausted, I stood outside a familiar address, 4782 Park Avenue. My heart stumbled. Apartment 23C. The irony wasn't lost on me. I almost laughed. Almost. The doorman recognized me instantly. Miss Carter. Right, go head up. The elevator groaned its way to the top floor, and I watched my reflection in the metal doors. Hair dripping, eyes tired, jacket creased. The version of me Adrian had met that first night, only now the story wasn't a meet cute. It was a reckoning. When the doors opened, I stared at 23D across the hall. The lights were on. Before I could stop myself, I knocked. He opened the door almost immediately. Barefoot, wearing a soft gray sweater. The look on his face was a mix of surprise and concern. Lily, what are you doing here? You're soaked. I have a delivery next door. I held up the bag lamely. He frowned, gently taking it from my hands. You're shivering. Come inside. Just for a second. I hesitated, but my body betrayed me. I stepped in. The apartment looked exactly the same, elegant, expensive, untouched by time. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a towel, wrapping it around my shoulders with the kind of tenderness that made it harder to breathe. You're freezing, he said quietly. Sit, please. I can't stay. I'm working. Lily, he said, and his tone, gentle but firm, stopped me. What's going on? You've been distant for days. You barely answer my texts. And now you're out here, delivering food in a storm. Talk to me. The words burned in my throat before I could stop them. I can't do this. He froze. Can't do what? This, us. My voice broke. I've been pretending the differences don't matter. But they do. I'm drowning. Adrian, I'm behind on my thesis. I'm broke, and I'm tired of trying to live in your world. His face tightened, a flicker of pain in his eyes. Have I ever asked you to be anyone but yourself? No. I whispered, this isn't your fault. It's mine. I lost myself trying to fit into your life. He stepped closer, voice low but urgent. Then let's change it. No more fancy dinners. No more pretending. We'll find balance. I don't care about any of that. I care about you. How I asked, my voice rising. How do we balance worlds that were never meant to meet? You have boardrooms and investors and people who treat your signature like gold. I have professors and overdue rent. He reached for me, but I stepped back. I'm falling in love with you. He said, suddenly, the words raw, unguarded. I know it's fast, but it's real. Tell me I'm wrong. The room swayed. My heart twisted painfully because he wasn't wrong. You can't fix this by loving me. I said, why not? Because love doesn't erase reality. Because eventually, one of us will start resenting the other for bending too far. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like the air hurt. Then tell me what to do. I don't know. I said, tears mixing with rainwater on my cheeks. I just know I need space Time to figure out who I am when I'm not orbiting your world. He stood very still. Every line of him drawn tight, if that's what you need. I won't fight it, but I'm not giving up. Lily, I'll be here when you're ready if you're ready. I nodded, unable to speak. He opened the door for me, his expression calm, but his eyes anything but. I'm sorry. I whispered, don't be sorry for knowing what you need. He said, just promise me you'll take care of yourself. I left before I broke completely. Outside. The rain was relentless. I delivered the food next door with shaking hands. Then stumbled into a cab. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and watched the city blur into streaks of color. Loving someone wasn't supposed to feel like this, like freedom and loss wrapped in the same breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt small again, ordinary, alone. And as the cab carried me away from Park Avenue, I wondered if I just made the right decision or the biggest mistake of my life. The 2 weeks that followed were both endless and weightless. The city kept moving, but I felt like I'd stepped out of sync with it, watching people hurry past while I stayed still. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the hollow spaces where Adrian's voice used to echo. I finished my thesis chapter. I picked up extra shifts. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. Everywhere I went, reminders of him found me. A song drifting from a passing car that sounded like the one he used to play. The scent of cedar cologne in the stairwell of my building. A black car idling outside a restaurant. Headlights cutting through the rain. I thought distance would help me heal, but it only made me see how much of me had changed because of him. Emma tried to keep me sane. She'd show up uninvited with takeout and gossip, forcing me to talk about anything but him. One night, she looked at me over a carton of noodles and said, you can call him, right? Space doesn't have to mean silence. I need to figure out who I am without him. I said, otherwise, I'll just disappear into his world again. She sighed, then figure it out. But don't close the door completely. People like him don't walk into your life twice. Maybe she was right. Maybe not. I didn't know. A week later, Dr. Harlow called me into her office. I expected criticism, another reminder that I was running behind, but instead, she smiled as she handed me back my latest chapter. This, she said, tapping the pages, is alive. You're finally writing from somewhere real. Whatever's been happening in your life, keep letting it bleed onto the page. I left her office feeling both lighter and raw. Maybe falling apart had been necessary. Maybe breaking open had let the truth seep in. I started writing differently after that, not just academic analysis, but essays about art and love and the terrifying beauty of wanting something more, on a whim. I submitted one of those essays to an online magazine. It was about how a single mistake knocking on the wrong door can change everything. 2 days later, they emailed me back. They wanted to publish it. It wasn't a career breakthrough, but it was a pulse, proof that I could build something of my own. Still, the quiet nights were the hardest. I missed the way he listened. The way he looked at me like I was the most unexpected thing in his world. I missed the music. Then, one gray afternoon, I heard it again. I was walking home from campus, my earbuds dead, my thoughts drifting, when faint piano music slipped through the noise of the street. It was coming from the community center on the corner, a building I'd passed 100 times but never noticed. Something in me froze. I followed the sound inside. The hallway smelled like dust and chalk, and the music grew louder with each step. When I reached the door marked music room, I stopped through the small window. I saw him. Adrian sat at an old upright piano surrounded by a group of children. He was laughing, really laughing, as one of the kids hit the wrong key. No, no, he said, still smiling. That's okay. Try again. Mistakes are how we learn. He looked lighter, his eyes softer. The weight he used to carry had been replaced with something quiet and genuine. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching him teach music to a room full of kids who were utterly enchanted by him. The man who once filled penthouse rooms with silence was now filling a small community hall with life. He looked up suddenly. His gaze found me through the window. And for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, a slow, certain smile that reached his eyes. One of the kids tugged his sleeve. Mr. Cole. Who's that? He looked back at them, still watching me. That, he said softly, is someone very important. When the class ended, parents trickled in to collect their children. Adrian talked to each one, kneeling to their kids' height, laughing with them like he'd been doing it for years. When the last student left, he turned to me. Hi, he said, voice low but sure. Hi, I whispered back. You're teaching, he nodded. I sold the company 3 weeks ago. I blinked. I sold it. He repeated. Use the money to start a foundation, music programs for kids who can't afford lessons, grants for young artists. I moved to Brooklyn. Smaller apartment, better life. I needed to do something that felt real. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I had to do it for myself. He said, not to get you back. You were right. Lily. I needed to stop living my father's life. He stepped closer. What about you? I took a shaky breath. I finished my thesis, started writing essays about art, about living authentically. One of them got published. He smiled. I'm not surprised. I looked down at my hands. I've been figuring out what I want, and I think I want to go to Italy for a year. See the paintings I've studied my whole life. Write about them. His eyes lit up. That sounds perfect. And then I said softly, I want to come back and teach, but on my own terms, not because it's the safe thing, because it's mine. He nodded slowly. And what else do you want? I met his gaze. If we can do it differently this time, as the people, we actually are not the versions we were trying to be. He didn't hesitate. He closed the space between us, his hands coming up to cup my face. I never stopped wanting you. He said, when he kissed me, it wasn't like that first night, reckless and consuming. It was steadier, anchored, the kind of kiss that feels like both a beginning and a homecoming. We sat together at the piano afterward, the room still humming from the echoes of music. So what now? I asked. Now, he said, fingers brushing the keys. We take it one day at a time. You finish your degree. I keep teaching. We see if our worlds can finally meet in the middle. Long distance, separate paths. It won't be easy. He smiled. Easy was never the point. I'd rather have hard and real than easy and hollow. I leaned against his shoulder. Play something for me. He did. The same melody I'd heard through the window, but now fuller. deeper, threaded with hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. When the last note faded, I whispered, "I'm gonna write about this." "About us?" he asked. "About finding courage in mistakes. About a girl who knocked on the wrong door and met a man who finally opened his own." He chuckled softly. "Change my name? Absolutely not." I said, "You're gonna be famous as the billionaire who gave it all up for piano lessons and a pizza girl. Former pizza girl." He corrected, "I quit last week." "Good?" I said, smiling. The hours were terrible. He took my hand. "Lily Carter, I can't promise forever, but I can promise I'll keep showing up. That I'll keep trying to build something real with you, not around you." I squeezed his hand. "That's all I want." Outside, the late afternoon light filtered through the windows, soft and golden. The city hummed beyond the walls, alive and relentless. Inside, we stayed at the piano. Two people who had collided by accident but were now choosing each other on purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. Because this time, I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's world. I was building mine, one song, one story, one brave moment at a time.